So if we're going to look at those nominees, we've got Stephon Diggs, Chubb, Henry, and Mahomes. I think Chubb's the clear fourth out of that. And then I'm going to have to say Diggs is probably the number three, just by, I know it's harsh, but just by virtue of being a wide receiver there usually.
It's a miracle! Oh, yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, that ball is close! He's given him! He's given him! Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday!
Hello and welcome back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 101 of the show. That feels a bit weird to say. Kind of surprised we got to episode 100, but very grateful at the same time. Today we are back to talk about the NFL. We haven't talked about the NFL too much since the playoffs began. I haven't been watching it. Well, I've been watching it, but I haven't been into it as much as, the festivities of January in Australia have kind of taken over, and the beautiful weather and stuff like that's been a bit of a distraction. So I've been more focused on the cricket, but I'm back here today to discuss the NFL. There's only one game left of the season. That's the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But today we're going to be addressing all the other matches that have been played. And by doing that, I mean we'll be discussing the NFL awards, or I think they call it the NFL honors in the official awards ceremony. So today we're gonna do the AFC. So we're gonna discuss the offensive MVP of the AFC, the defensive MVP, an offensive rookie MVP, a defensive rookie MVP, and then we'll discuss some other awards like Coach of the Year, Signing of the Year, Match of the Year, etc., etc. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go division by division and kind of use that as a bit of a way to create a nominations list, and then we're going to discuss who the overall winner is in the conference. And then in the next episode that I will be filming straight after this, but it will be released maybe a day later, I will be doing the NFC. So if we're going to get straight into it, we will be discussing the offensive MVP of the AFC. So I'm going to go division by division, as I said, for each award, discuss the nominees from that division, and then, sort of pick an overall winner. So starting with the AFC East, there actually wasn't too many offensive weapons when you think about the Jets, the Patriots, and even the Dolphins this year. So it really only left one team to give us their candidate. And it was a 50-50 really between Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. It's always tough in a great quarterback wide receiver duo. Is it more the throwing or is it more the catching? But in this certain combination, no disrespect to Josh Allen, but I'm going with Stephon Diggs as the AFC East offensive MVP, and therefore he is my first nominee for the AFC MVP. He had the most receptions in the league with 127, most receiving yards with 1,535, third most first downs of any receiver, and in my opinion, he was the third best receiver in the league this year behind Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. He just did it all really. If you watch them, similar in the way Devontae Adams does it, and also Michael Thomas of last year used to do it, the defenses basically know he's getting the ball, but they just can't really stop it. And with the other talent they had on that Bills offense, they couldn't really triple team him, and that was enough for him to basically dominate every single match he played in. He turned into one of the signings of the year, but we'll talk about that towards the end of the episode. He is certainly in the conversation for that one, coming from Minnesota last year. And yeah, he's always shown potential, but in a wide receiver dominant system with Adam Thielen, he was always, not necessarily the secondary player, but Thielen often stole the headlines when he could have been, in the headlines the whole time if he was just on his own. He was playing that well. But I think now he's gone to Buffalo, a team that historically hasn't had the greatest of offenses in the last, 15 to 20 years. And he's really stolen the show, and I think he's elevated Josh Allen's game to the next level. Josh Allen has a lot of raw talent, but I think he needed some skill around him to really turn him into a top 10, top 6 quarterback in the league, and I think he's done that in my opinion. But yeah, honourable mention to Josh Allen. In my rankings, I had him finishing as the 6th best quarterback of the year, which is certainly no mean feat. I think it's his 3rd year, so it's pretty impressive to think how good he's going to become. But yeah, for me, Stephon Diggs is the offensive MVP candidate from the AFC East. Moving on to the AFC North, I've gone with Nick Chubb. It's actually another one where this was kind of tough. There weren't too many outstanding candidates in this division. But I went with Nick Chubb, third most yards per game of any running back in terms of rushing. Fourth most rushing yards per attempt, second most out of RBs. I think Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson had more, but that's not really a fair comparison. He averaged a rushing TD every game he played. He only played 12 matches, had 12 rushing touchdowns, and he had the 7th most rushing yards in the whole league, and that is with only playing 12 matches. So I'm not really taking into account that he only played 12 matches, as that's kind of unfair to the guys who played all the matches because it's not their fault he missed time. But yeah, pretty incredible year from Nick Chubb. I remember at the start of this year when we were on with Pilch, he, regular guest on the show, he said that he thinks Nick Chubb was one of the most underrated offensive players after last year. And when we were talking about the NFL Top 100, he reckons he was like a top 20 player in his opinion. And I think he definitely showed that this year. He's probably, if you gave everyone the same amount of carries with the same O-line, I think Nick Chubb would come out with the best results, if I'm honest. I think he is the best quality rusher in the league. That's a big call, and I'm not sure if it's completely true, but that's just my gut feel. Absolute star. And him, along with his good mate, Kareem Hunt, obviously Baker Mayfield had a pretty good year after a tumultuous 2019, but they are really the reasons why the Browns had such a good season, and especially at the back end of it. So Nick Chubb is the AFC North Offensive MVP nomination, in my opinion, but honourable mention goes to Kareem Hunt. He was right by Nick Chubb's side most game and wasn't far behind in most stats. The AFC South, this division was actually stacked this year. Last year, I don't think it was as good, and this year there was a lot of standout performances, but we all know who the AFC South Offensive MVP nominee is, and that's Derrick Henry. Most rushing yards in the NFL for the second year in a row, I believe. Maybe third year. I think it was just second year. He had over 2,000 yards, which was, I think, 500 yards ahead of the next best. Most rushing yards per game in the NFL, most rushing touchdowns, most rushing first downs. So, he couldn't really break any more stats if he tried. Yes, he got more volume than I think any other running back. He had a lot of attempts, but that's not his fault when he's running as well as he is. Why wouldn't you keep giving him the ball? So I think that's a fair call to make him the AFC South Offensive MVP nominee. The honourable mentions for this is a long list. You got Ryan Tannehill, had another great year. Deshaun Watson, he had the most passing yards of the season. Jonathan Taylor had a very impressive year in his first year in the NFL. AJ Brown broke out as we were expecting after a strong debut season last year. James Robinson was an absolute shock of an undrafted rookie. He had a great year. Phillip Rivers was another good one, and Brandon Cooks, just to round out that list, all had very impressive years in the AFC South. It was a pretty impressive division this year, even if teams like the Texans and Jags didn't have the best record. And then to finish it off, the AFC West Offensive MVP, I can't lie, I was actually tempted to give this to Tyreek Hill, but you can't really not go with Patrick Mahomes, can you? 3 game-winning drives, 3 fourth-quarter comebacks, most passing yards per game, second most passing yards in total. Just another freak year from P. Mahomes. Going to be interesting to see if he wins the MVP. I'm not sure if he will. I'll talk about that in the NFC episode as well. Him and Rodgers are neck and neck, not really in my opinion, but in most people's opinion, I think. But yeah, Mahomes, he looks like he's going to be a star in this league for a long time now. There are a few people questioning whether it was maybe just an early career fluke, but he's shown us, I think, 3 years in a row now, so I don't think we can say that anymore. And he's just a star-studded quarterback that we can start to expect this really every year. So yeah, he had another absolute freak year. Honourable mentions here go to Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, and even Josh Jacobs. They all had pretty impressive years. So if we're going to look at those nominees, we've got Stephon Diggs, Chubb, Henry, and Mahomes. I think Chubb's the clear 4th out of that. And then I'm going to have to say Diggs is probably the number 3, just by, I know it's harsh, but just by virtue of being a wide receiver, they're usually less less important in games. I'm sure I'm offending a lot of people there, but I think it's hard not to go with P. Mahomes. Yes, Derrick Henry was by far the most dominant running back, and next to probably Dalvin Cook, there wasn't really anyone else even close to the conversation there. I think I'm going to have to go with Patrick Mahomes just because the impact he had on the Chiefs this year, likely going to lead them to another Super Bowl. We'll see that in about a week's time. And also just the quarterback position. Yes, it annoys me how much importance is put on it, and especially in terms of MVP awards, but it does make sense. They do touch the ball every single play, unlike any other position. So it is by far the most important position on the field. So I think it's fair. Patty Mahomes wins the AFC Offensive MVP award. Now moving on to the Defensive MVP award for the AFC. I'm going to do the same system, roll through the divisions. If we're going to look at the AFC East first, once again, not too many options in this one, if I'm honest. The AFC East, they had some solid teams, but not too many star-studded players. But this was easy choice. Xavier Howard, most interceptions on the season with 10, most passes defended with 20. He had a bit of a down year last year, but he went back to his career best form, really, that he was so dominant within around 2017, 2018. And yeah, he just showed that he's probably one of, if not the best cornerbacks in the league. They signed Byron Jones in the offseason, so you thought maybe less importance was going to be put on his lockdown role and that they were going to be more of a tandem. But I think, if anything, that allowed Howard to kind of be a bit riskier in some of his play. And he really stood out this year as one of the best players on that Dolphins team and in the AFC in general. So he is definitely the defensive candidate for defensive MVP out of the AFC East. Shout out though to Jordan Poyer. I always think it's Brian Poyer, but then I'm getting confused with Brian Hoyer. But yeah, Jordan Poyer had a pretty good season for the Buffalo Bills as well. AFC North Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think this is any debate really. Actually, there is a few good players in this one. I can't say that with such confidence. But TJ Watt for me. Outside linebacker from the Steelers. Most sacks in the year out of the whole NFL with 15. Most tackles for losses out of the whole NFL with 23. And most QB hits in the whole NFL with 41. So 3 pretty important stats, especially when it comes to pass rushing, and he's leading the NFL on them all. So pretty hard not to have him in here. I do think tackles for losses is a seriously underrated stat, because a tackle for a loss is essentially the same as a sack. It's just a running back, not a quarterback. So the fact that he's leading sacks and tackles for losses, that's pretty impressive. And for me, he's the clear candidate out of the AFC North. Big shout-outs, though, to Marlon Humphrey. Had a really impressive year. I think he had 8 forced fumbles, which is pretty incredible. And, yeah, he just put on a clinic all year. Myles Garrett as well. He was very impressive once again. 12 sacks. 18 QB hits, 10 tackles for a loss, 4 forced fumbles. So he had another wrecking year for the Browns. And Stephon Tuitt also had another pretty good year. Moving into the AFC South, there was a little bit less to choose from here. There was a lot of depth in the AFC South's defensive ranks, but not necessarily that certified gun. I've actually gone with probably a lesser-known player, but Joe Schobert, linebacker of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He just had really well-rounded stats. Nothing really jumps off the paper. He had the 11th most solo tackles on the year with 84. And yeah, he just had a really impressive year. Very well-rounded, as I mentioned. 6 tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions. He just, ticked every box in terms of every stat. And yeah, without him, I'm not sure how bad that Jacksonville defense could have got, because he was really carrying them. He was a signing this year, so... we'll talk about him in signings of the year definitely later. Honourable mentions in the AFC South. Similar to the offense, they have a lot of depth in that division. JJ Watt had another very good year. I can't lie, I thought he was kind of past his best, especially after the injuries he'd had. But this year he was well and truly dominating games again. 17 QB hits, 14 tackles for a loss. Darius Leonard, similar. He was out for most of last year with an injury, but he came back and was one of the best linebackers in the comp. Kenny Moore was great. DeForest Buckner, Zach Cunningham, and Malcolm Butler. Is it Malcolm Butler? Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm getting confused with that. But yeah, the cornerback from the Tennessee Titans. They all had very good years. And the AFC West, to finish off, this was definitely the weakest division in terms of defense. The only guy worth mentioning is Justin Simmons, really, but he was one of the lower-ranked defenders I had mentioned for this award. He was top 5 in interceptions in the NFL, top 20 for solo tackles, but yeah, nothing outstanding from him, just pretty well-rounded, similar to Schobert, so he continued to be one of the better safeties in the league. And I remember that clutch interception. Was it against the Chargers, maybe? I can't remember. They had a game come down to the wire. Maybe it was the Falcons, I'm not sure. But he saved the game. Yeah, that's just what he does. So he is the final nominee. But overall, I'm going to have to go with... I can't lie. It's not even close for me. It's TJ Watt. To lead the league in those three of the most important defensive stats. For him to lead the league in that. And I'm telling you what, he does not just lead them. He absolutely obliterates everyone in those stats. I think QB hits, he was had 10 more than the next best. Tackles for a loss, he had 5 more. So yeah, he's an absolute wrecker, TJ Watt, and he is deserving of the AFC Defensive Player of the Year. Alright, now into the rookie awards. Offensive rookie, I actually do not have any rookie nomination from the AFC East. No one was really worth mentioning. Only ones I can really think of, Zach Moss, but he didn't really have a great year. Tua, he didn't play too often. And yeah, Damian Harris did a little bit for the Pats, but that's all I can really say. So I'm not going to put anyone up from that division. In the AFC North, I've actually gone with Chase Claypool. Quite a few good options in this division in terms of rookies, but he had 9 receiving touchdowns. He was 31st in receiving yards, which doesn't sound incredible, but for a rookie, that's pretty impressive. 2nd round pick, and yeah, he definitely exceeded expectation, and he gave some nice depth to that Pittsburgh receiving core. Honourable mentions go to T. Higgins and J.K. Dobbins, though both had very good years, and especially Dobbins, he came home very well, but T. Higgins was also pretty impressive all year, and I think if Joe Burrow didn't go down, he might have been nominated for this award. Next up, we've got the AFC South Defensive Rookie MVP, Offensive Rookie, sorry, and we'll be going with Jonathan Taylor. This was a tough one, actually. I think James Robinson's season's been a little bit under-talked about and underappreciated, if I'm honest, considering the situation he was in Jacksonville, and just as an undrafted rookie, it was pretty incredible what he was able to do, but Jonathan Taylor, 3rd most rushing yards in the competition, 3rd most first downs as a rusher, 5th most yards per game. He was a 2nd round pick. We were pretty high on him on this podcast. We thought he was going to be pretty good, and he turned out to be even better than we thought. So he started the season pretty slow, but he came home real strong and was a big reason why the Colts ended up making the playoffs and made a good fist of it, to be honest. So yeah, he's definitely the offensive rookie candidate from the AFC South. From the AFC West, not much of a battle here. It's Justin Herbert, 6th most passing yards in the NFL, 4th most yards per game, 3 game-winning drives. He was the 6th pick out of Oregon, so you would suggest that means he has pretty high hopes. But I think people were surprised how early he went, and were probably thinking, especially compared to Burrow and Tua, that he was by far the 3rd option there. But going into the next season, it looks as if he might be the best of the 3, but we'll see how that ends up going. The honourable mentions in the AFC West, probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerry Jeudy. Both had pretty solid seasons. Nothing outrageous from those two, but pretty handy. And then, so the nominees are Jonathan Taylor, Justin Herbert, Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is certainly the 3rd out of those 3. But I'm going to have to go with Jonathan Taylor. Yes, he started the season slow. He didn't have the most outrageous yards per attempt, but he came home really, really strong. And yeah, just looks like he's going to be a certified RB1 for the Colts for a long time. So I think they've bagged a really good one there. Just like Justin Herbert had an insane year, and quarterback is definitely more important than running back. But Jonathan Taylor had a pretty incredible year, so I'm going with him. Maybe controversial, but yeah. Defensive Rookie of the Year, once again, there was no candidate from the AFC East. No one played enough games. Started. My criteria was you had to have started 12 or more games in your position to qualify. So no one qualified in the AFC East. In the AFC North, Patrick Queen was the clear standout. Linebacker from the Baltimore Ravens, first round pick, so he had quite high expectations, but he just slotted into that awesome defense and really didn't miss a beat. Started every single game, pretty well-rounded stats, nothing jumping off the page, but he was, well, I'll talk about it, but he was probably the clear candidate from this side of the ball. Julian Blackmon is the AFC South candidate, safety from Indianapolis Colts. He didn't have an outstanding year, but he was the best of what was available in the AFC South for me to choose from. He had a couple interceptions, a forced fumble, but he played a lot of games, and for a third-round pick, he looks like he's going to be a pretty good pickup. And then in the AFC West, Kenneth Murray. Haven't heard too much about him, but linebacker from the Chargers. He was a first-round pick. But yeah, once again, probably just best of the lot. Very well-rounded stats like Blackmon, but nothing really outstanding. But for me, the defensive rookie of the AFC is clearly Patrick Queen. He was by far the better option out of him, Kenneth Murray and Julian Blackmon. But those two definitely had serviceable seasons, so nothing to worry about from those two. Very good years. All right, that rounds off the awards in terms of the player awards. Now I'm going to just run through the general awards. So Coach of the Year. Coach of the Year, I went through team by team and just compared their performance from last year to this year, because I think that's one of the best ways to think about how a coach has done, whether they've improved or not. And by doing that, I've come up with two main options, Brian Flores and Sean McDermott. Kevin Stefanski is probably stiff to miss out, to be honest. He might win the actual award, but for me, Sean McDermott, the Bills were a pretty solid team last year, but then they became absolute world beaters this year and weren't too far away from making the Super Bowl. So I think he definitely deserves a shout out. But for me, the winner of Coach of the Year in the AFC is Brian Flores. He was probably more talked about last year than this year in terms of one of the best coaches, but he still took Miami from 5-11 to 10-6, which is pretty impressive, especially considering half the year was with a rookie quarterback. He turned the Miami defense into one of the best defenses in the competition. They were single-handedly winning some games. For example, we saw that against the Rams, and they had plenty of injuries to deal with, but he just kept evolving and finding plays to do roles. For example, in their running back slot, coming into the season, it looked like it was going to be Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. Ended up being Myles Gaskin, turned into a beast. He got injured, then they found Salvon Ahmed. He became a beast, and he got injured. And they just kept finding new players to fill the position. And that's the kind of thing that they were doing all year. So, I think Brian Flores is a worthy winner of Coach of the Year. Game of the Year, I'm giving it to the Ravens versus the Browns. I think it was a Monday Night Football game, Week 14. The Ravens beat the Browns 47-42. This is the famous game where people think Lamar crapped his pants, but I'm still not sure if he did or not. Lamar rushed for 124 yards from only 9 attempts, so he was back to his 2019 best there. Ravens had 5 rushing touchdowns. The Browns had 4, making it 9 overall, which I can't remember if it was the most ever or the most in a long time, but it was certainly something you don't see every day. And Baker Mayfield threw for 343 yards in one of his best games of the year. It was just back and forward. I remember Lamar came out after his poo break, some would call it, and first snap, he just set up a touchdown. So, yeah, it was just really good attacking NFL, really. And then top 5 signings of the year. This was a tough one. It's tough to take into account the value side of things, but I'm going to start. I've actually only got... Oh, yeah, no, I do have 5 here, sorry. Number 5, I'm going to Forrest Buckner. He came from San Francisco. I don't think he played all 16 games. I think he played 12 or 13 or something. But he had a pretty good year. Not probably up to the same lofty heights as he did at the Niners, but maybe just because he was in a smaller market team in Indianapolis, but he had a very good year. So that was a good trade from the Colts. Another good pickup from the Colts was Phillip Rivers in free agency. I was very against this move. I thought it was pretty negative play from the Colts, but he ended up leading them to the playoffs, and I think he made them a lot better team than most other quarterbacks could have, so fair play to Phillip Rivers. Number 3, I think this guy probably isn't talked about much this season, but I think he actually had a really good year. Yes, he's catching throws from one of the best quarterbacks in the competition, but Brandon Cooks... yes, he was playing second fiddle to Will Fuller, but even after Will Fuller got suspended, Cook still managed to rack up really good numbers against quality opposition, and I think he was back to some of his finest form this year after a few down years with the Rams. Number 2, I'm going with Joe Schobert. As I mentioned, he was my candidate for Defensive Player of the Year from the AFC South. The Jacksonville linebacker came from the Browns, I believe, in free agency, and he had a really impressive season. I think he's got like a 5-year contract as well, so he's going to be a locked-in certified starter for that Jacksonville defense, which is what they need at the moment, with little stability going in any position in that side. And then number 1, I've gone with Stephon Diggs. I don't think it was too tough. In my opinion, he was the 3rd best wide receiver of the year. And yes, now that you know that Minnesota got Justin Jefferson as part of this trade, it makes the deal look less valuable, but just the fact that Diggs was a top quality wideout. Yes, Jefferson looks like he's going to be a freak as well, but you have to say to the Bills, that's a pretty impressive pickup. And yeah, so he is the number 1 signing for me. Alright, that's all I've got for you today. I really appreciate you tuning in and listening. If you've got any thoughts or you have any disputes really with my calls, feel free to comment them or DM me on Instagram. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, tune in for the next episode coming out tomorrow on the same thing but the NFC. And I'm sure we'll have more NFL and other sporting content to come in the near future. But for now, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers.